Good afternoon. We are happy to have here with us Mr. Daniel Gros. Mr. Daniel Gros has been in the Center for European Policy Studies, CEPS, for many, many years. He's a distinguished fellow. He writes in Project Syndicate. He's very influential in his field. Mr. Gros, thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
Can we ask, I'm going to start with the economic part of it. How big of a challenge is inflation for Europe's economy?
It is the biggest challenge right now. I would say maybe as important as the corona recession.
But how should we deal with it? How should Europe deal with it?
Of course, with this kind of energy price shock, you have to take completely different measures than with the corona crisis.
Mm-hmm.
There, people were out of a job. You had to support their incomes, and that was done all over Europe. And Europe helped via the Next Generation EU program. Right now it's different. We are dependent on energy from abroad. We have to pay a higher price, right? We don't pay it to Russia. We have to pay it to Norway, to Oman, to somebody else, right? And therefore we cannot just throw money at the problem. We have to accept that the prices are high, that prices of some goods go up,
mm-hmm.
and the only thing the governments can do is protect the vulnerable people who have to fight with their budget every month, and to make sure that our industry can adapt as quickly as possible to a new reality where energy is just much more expensive.
We have a very high increase in commodities. Is it the war, this crisis, to blame for this increase?
It's convenient for many governments to say it's the war, mm-hmm. right? And therefore it's partially, say, our responsibility, and therefore we have to compensate everybody and spend money left and right. I don't think that's true. We already had an increase in gas and oil prices before the war started. Actually, gas prices have been constant since the war started, going up and down, but not really increasing. Mm-hmm. And the real reason why we have high gas and oil prices is because for the last 4 or 5 years, nobody invested in finding new oil and gas. And if you don't invest, you have the old fields, mm-hmm. which are still producing, but their production goes down. You need to find new ones. And if you don't look for new ones, production goes down. And then came the corona crisis. No problem because no demand. And then after the corona crisis, we had a very strong upswing in Europe, in Greece, in Asia. Everybody wanted suddenly to have gas, and there was none.
How do we overcome that? I mean, they have announced, the government started to, the EU has announced the plan, government started announcing some building of LNG stations, but how do we really overcome that?
So there are two things which we have to keep separate. Mm-hmm. One thing is we have high oil prices. Nothing we can do, right? Governments cannot magically say mm-hmm. somebody sell us cheaper oil. Then we have gas prices. Gas prices are already high because of the lack of supplies, because of lack of activity over the last years. And now comes something else. Can we do without Russian gas, right? And there, of course, governments must act. Mm-hmm. They have to construct new LNG terminals, and they also have to accept that if we don't want to buy Russian gas, we have to buy LNG. And LNG, there's a global market where we compete with Asia. So basically, we go to Asia and say, you offer 100, we offer 110, right? Sure. And that bids up the price. How much is difficult to say, but a bit. It mm-hmm. will certainly increase. And if we do that, construct LNG facilities, strengthen our interconnectors, mm-hmm. so that gas can flow from where the terminals are to where it's needed, then we can live without Russian gas.
Yeah, but that takes some time. I mean, even LNG stations need like 2 years to create. I mean, what do you do in the meantime?
The time dimension is not either or,
mm-hmm.
right? Tomorrow, nothing you can do. Next month, already a little bit. In 6 months, you can do a lot. You don't need a fixed LNG terminal. You can buy or rent a floating one, right? In 6 months also you might find some cargoes which were originally going to Japan. You tell them, I offer a bit more, and the ship comes to Europe. So in 6 months already you can do a lot. Perhaps not enough. In 1 year, 2 years, I think we should be there.
So we can see the energy prices going down in 1-2 years, let's say.
That is not certain.
Or the market will anticipate and move before.
I don't think the energy price will go down quickly, because when we haven't done enough exploration for 5 or 6 years, then prices go up and people will start exploring and find new fields. But they need 3, 4, 5 years to bring these fields on stream, right? To build their own facilities. And therefore I don't think the era of high energy prices will be over suddenly in a year or two. It will take longer.
Should the EU Recovery Fund be extended to help us face what's going on? What do you think?
I don't think that is actually something where the EU can do a lot, because in the end we have to pay for it. The Arabs, the Australians, the Norwegians won't give us the gas cheaper just because we are Europeans. So everybody in Europe will have to pay a higher price. But you want to protect some consumers, of course, but that's social policy, very important. But social policy is basically a national responsibility in the EU. It's not really an EU responsibility. If you want to put social policy at the EU level, okay, then we will have to need to do many other things.
What do you believe about the sanctions? Do they work? Should they have been smarter? Do they hit us more than they hit Russia?
The sanctions were meant to be at the beginning as a deterrent. Don't do it, Putin, because then we do sanctions. That's over now. The sanctions can also not stop Putin's war machine tomorrow. Right? He has enough stockpiles of weapons. He still gets some money from oil exports, right? Therefore, his war machinery will continue sometime. But our sanctions, especially the sanctions on technology, will have a profound impact on the Russian economy. It will be more difficult for Russia to produce its bombs, its fighter planes, its tanks. It will be more difficult for Russia to explore in the Arctic new gas fields. So the Russian economy will shrink. And the economic potential of the Russian war machine will also shrink. It takes a couple of years. I think it's necessary, but we should not expect that it will change the course of the war.
You say it takes a couple of years, which means we should keep those sanctions in place for a couple of years?
Maybe we'll have to keep them in place for a decade. Just difficult to imagine that even if there's an armistice, if the weapons no longer fire, right? There's no real peace, right? As long as Russia keeps even a sliver of Ukrainian territory. So I think these sanctions, unfortunately, will have to remain in place for a very long time.
To actually weaken Russia.
Yes.
So the last thing I would like to ask you, I mean, it has been a shock to many. We didn't believe we were going to have war within the borders of Europe. From your experience and from your research, what is the most important thing from what's going on right now? I mean, the one thing you would, like, if you would write something to your children, what would you like to write them so they would know from this period?
Be careful. The world is more dangerous than we had hoped for. So prepare for the worst and, of course, hope for the best.
Thank you very much for being here with us today.